Would you hear a hum in the sky? Would you see the metallic glint hovering on the horizon? Maybe you wouldn't even have time, because today death can come without warning, without soldiers, without planes, without visible bombs. The new war has no trenches, it has algorithms, it has invisible eyes, and it's already happening right now, at this very moment. As you watch this video, drones are flying over conflict zones on 5 continents. They're scanning targets, identifying faces, sending data to artificial intelligence systems that decide who lives, who dies. You think this is science fiction? It's not. This is 21st century warfare. Consider how everything has changed. In 1945, the Allies used more than 3 million soldiers to defeat the Axis. In 2003, the United States invaded Iraq with 150,000 troops. But in 2024, in Sudan, Ukraine, and the Gaza Strip, commercial drones fitted with explosives are deciding battles, without a single human finger needing to pull the trigger. Weapons now see, listen, and decide. A simple piece of software, a line of code, can cost hundreds of lives in seconds. And the question no one is asking enough is, who is controlling all this? Or worse, ... Is anyone still in control in Ukraine? A new kind of warfare is being waged. Soldiers with helmets connected to AI systems coordinate attacks with swarms of drones, while facial recognition software locates enemies in seconds. In Gaza, autonomous weapons patrol borders with minimal human interference. In Nagorno-Karabakh, the use of Turkish Bayraktar drones has become a symbol of a lightning war. And these are not isolated cases, they are the new norm. The world is moving toward a scenario where war will be decided by data processing, no longer by human courage or strategy. But are we ready for this? Or rather, have we already passed the point of no return? Imagine a conflict between 2 nuclear powers, where attack decisions are automated. Imagine a facial recognition error, a biased algorithm, a machine firing by mistake. What happens when war escapes human oversight? We're talking about a future where lethal autonomous weapons are cheaper than a smartphone, where terrorists can program AI-powered drones purchased on the black market, where governments can eliminate targets without accountability. This is already happening, and no one is prepared for what comes next. This video will take you inside this new era of warfare, an era where soldiers don't sleep, tanks don't have wheels, and generals are machines. We'll show you how it all began, where we are now, and, most importantly, where we're going, because if you think the war of the future is still far away, maybe you're already living in it and you didn't even realize it. In the next section, you'll understand how the race for this technology began, which countries were the first to test AI weapons, and why history repeats itself when humanity advances too fast and thinks too slowly. In the mid-2000s, after terrorist attacks shocked the world, the United States accelerated the development of unmanned aerial vehicles, the famous Predator and Reaper drones. These first models, equipped with high-resolution cameras and Hellfire missiles, were tested in Afghanistan in 2001 and, soon after, in Iraq in 2003, marking the beginning of a new era in which it was possible to observe an attack without exposing soldiers to enemy fire. This technology, initially seen as a solution to reduce human casualties, soon sparked ethical controversies. Should those who fall within the range of a satellite be entitled to human judgment? Even so, alliances quickly formed. NATO countries shared data with Washington, while major arms manufacturers saw the military duopoly as a chance for billions in profit. Thus, the race began, driven by government contracts and geopolitical pressure, creating a dynamic in which technological advancements were light years ahead of the debate over rules of engagement. In the late 2010s, the evolution of artificial intelligence algorithms took the next leap. Facial recognition databases, initially applied to urban security, were adapted to the battlefield. Beginning in 2015, secret experiments showed that software trained to distinguish uniforms could select targets without direct operator intervention. In 2017, leaked documentation revealed tests of autonomous systems capable of identifying enemy vehicles in deserts and rural areas, a scheme reminiscent of observation towers from ancient wars, but with global reach. Emerging countries like Turkey and Iran purchased these software licenses through shell companies. While in Europe, regulatory debates were bogged down in bureaucracy. A repetition of historical mistakes was looming. In their eagerness to gain strategic advantage, governments ignored the lessons of the past, replacing treaties and conventions with lines of code. At the same time, Non-state actors began exploiting security flaws. Insurgent groups and militias in the Middle East purchased modified commercial drones, attached explosive devices, and created a series of small attacks that paralyzed supply routes. In 2018, the bombing of humanitarian convoys in Yemen by DIY drones deserted entire areas, demonstrating that military power alone could not decide a conflict. This decentralization of technology made any battlefront vulnerable to improvised interventions. Meanwhile, major powers exchanged ideological spats at the UN, accusing each other of escalating the use of lethal weapons without international legal basis. Cyber warfare, previously invisible, began to have concrete repercussions on the ground. Every piece of malicious code injected into a logistics network was a bomb waiting to explode. In this context, history repeats itself. Just like the alliances of 1914 that dragged nations into trench warfare, dependence on military technology creates powerful constraints. At first it seemed like a mere tactical leap, using cameras to monitor villages, employing robots to deactivate mines. But the logic of war win at any cost proved relentless. As more countries signed contracts to equip ground tanks with computer vision systems, the militarization of algorithms became inevitable. Poland, Saudi Arabia, and even South American nations began ordering state-of-the-art packages, including software that promised to reduce human error and optimize economic bottlenecks for the enemy. At the heart of this race was the distorted notion of clean war. Robots don't bleed, don't suffer trauma, don't ask for surrender. But by delegating lethal decisions to machines, it opened the door to biases embedded in the training data that identified civilians as combatants, and women and children as legitimate targets. Independent studies have shown that, in dense urban areas, up to 30% of autonomous attacks could have been prevented with human verification, yet military technology companies continued to release updates at short intervals, as if they were social media apps rather than software that decides life and death. Now, when you look at the global landscape, you realize that the seeds planted 2 decades ago have blossomed into a minefield of digital disputes. The past has shaped the present. We've seen incredible advances in surveillance, territorial mapping, and troop coordination, but we've paid a high price in terms of human rights and political stability. In the next section, you'll discover the real impact of these choices, the invisible cost that falls on economies, families, and the very notion of sovereignty. The war without soldiers on the front lines is already taking its toll on the pockets of millions. You feel it at the gas station when a liter of gasoline jumps from 5 reals to 7 reals in a matter of weeks. This increase is no coincidence. Conflicts in Ukraine, the Middle East, and the blockade of essential shipping routes have driven up the price of oil by more than 40% since 2021, according to international agencies. This trend drives up inflation rates, erodes purchasing power, and makes basic foods like rice and wheat unaffordable for those already struggling daily to put food on the table. Ask a family in Lebanon or Syria how much it costs to pay double for a kilo of bread. It's war coming to each of our breakfasts. At the same time, fertilizer shortages, resulting from economic sanctions and the cut in natural gas exports, are generating a food crisis in the most vulnerable countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Humanitarian aid groups reported that up to 20% of farmers stopped planting last season due to a lack of inputs. This triggers a domino effect: crop failures, hunger, and forced migration. Today, more than 35 million people are internally displaced by armed conflict, according to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR. These multitudes are not just statistics, they are mothers, children, and the elderly walking miles in search of safety. Who profits from this instability? Major defense conglomerates are posting record sales. Surveillance systems, military AI software, autonomous tanks, and swarms of viral drones are being sold at ever higher prices. Governments justify this spending as national security, but this term can mask a profit cycle that fuels more conflict. Meanwhile, technology companies are becoming new actors in the war, deploying servers and data centers in conflict zones to ensure minimal latency. Each algorithm upgrade essentially represents a bet on the permanence of chaos. On the other hand, we see the collapse of global supply chains. Electronics manufacturers are facing a shortage of semiconductors. Automotive industries are seeing assembly lines come to a standstill, and the prices of parts for commercial aircraft maintenance are skyrocketing. All of this reflects a phenomenon that is little noticed. Today's war is also revealing itself as an economic war. The invisible cost lies hidden in closed airports, in unfulfilled orders, and in factories operating at half throttle, fueling recessions in countries that have nothing to do with the conflict. And what about human lives? Family members record the voices of those left behind. My brother was a truck driver, transporting grain from Ukraine. He disappeared in the winter of 2024. The cold reached -20°C, and he didn't arrive alive. We never heard from him again. This is just one of thousands of real stories. Ordinary people whose fates were decided by machines and lines of code. How many families are scattered around the world waiting for an answer that will never come? Each refugee number corresponds to a face, a name, and a dream interrupted. While the press focuses on the battles, the greatest damage is done away from the cameras, in the pockets, at the dinner table, and to the security of neutral nations. Global dependence on military supplies and technology has caused even countries without active militaries to feel the impact. Brazil, for example, saw the price of cooking gas rise 25% in 2023, and has been importing wheat at double the historical price. Have you ever wondered what your next grocery bill will be? What will your family's livelihood be like if the war escalates? In the next section, we'll project the risks of escalation and ask, what if nothing changes? Where are we headed? Can you imagine a war without soldiers or tanks, but with satellites obeying commands generated by supercomputers? By 2030, military analysts project that cooperative drone swarms will be capable of performing complex missions, patrolling entire borders, identifying threats, and neutralizing them before a human even pulls a trigger. These swarms will consist of hundreds, perhaps thousands of units, communicating via networked AI, sharing real-time imagery, mapping vulnerabilities, and executing chain attacks. Imagine an adversary system being simultaneously overwhelmed from all vantage points. A translucent siege, impossible to detect and even worse to defend. And if this technology falls into the hands of terrorist groups or rogue states, the humanitarian response will be nearly invisible outbreaks of destruction, unfolding silently, without sirens, without soldiers on the ground, but with civilians paying the price. If nothing is done to regulate or limit the development of blind autonomous weapons, we will be facing a new digital arms race in which the criterion for victory will be whoever has the most ruthless algorithm. But it doesn't end there. Technological escalation poses the risk of a chain reaction. When an autonomous system identifies a colleague as a threat, whether through software flaws or data manipulation, it can trigger accidental hostilities. In 2025, a NATO exercise nearly spiraled out of control when a protective drone misinterpreted the approach of a civilian aircraft, opening fire on a simulated target. Now imagine this in the heat of a real conflict, with tensions already high. Mutual distrust between countries will be exacerbated by millisecond-level decisions, made by machines that don't understand cultural context, political nuances, or rules of engagement. We're heading toward a scenario where the worst possible war is one no one will admit to starting because the trigger was a coding error, not a deliberate act. Cyber attacks and kinetic forces are also expected to become increasingly integrated. Instead of bombing physical targets, nations will be able to destabilize entire economies with massive attacks on critical infrastructure, power plants, financial systems, and communications networks, using AI to find and exploit vulnerabilities. In real time, the damage will be measured not in destroyed buildings, but in citywide blackouts, plummeting stock markets, and spoiled goods at ports. In this environment, war will have no borders or precedents. It will be global, continuous, and invisible, fought both in the skies and in the silence of fiber-optic cables. The line between national security and economic warfare will become indistinguishable, and neutral nations could be overwhelmed by waves of digital destruction. There's a faint light at the end of the tunnel. International treaties under discussion attempt to ban fully autonomous weapons without direct human supervision, but they face political resistance and powerful corporate interests. Some nations have proposed a digital Geneva Pact to define ethical boundaries, add verification code, and require independent audits of military AI. However, these initiatives are progressing at a snail's pace, while research labs and defense sectors advance at rocket speed. The contradiction is stark. Each breakthrough at the negotiating table entails years of debate. While a simple pulse of light can connect combat drones to an AI server that responds in milliseconds. And you, the viewer, what will you do in the face of this future? Will we silently accept the invisibility of war, or will we demand that our representatives make decisions that limit the lethal power of machines? The next war may not need soldiers, and it may already have begun. In the final section, we will reflect on the role of society, the media, and each of us in the face of this reality. It is time to decide whether we will allow technology to dictate who lives or dies. We have reached a decisive moment when each of us must understand the scale of what is at stake. The technologies that fascinate us, drones that map cities, algorithms that process unimaginable amounts of data, artificial intelligence that learns on its own, can become instruments of mass destruction if not regulated responsibly. This isn't just about defense policies or academic debates. We're talking about what the security of our homes, our children, and our societies will look like in the coming years. Every legislator that hesitates, every treaty that doesn't move forward, poses a real risk that the next spark of conflict will be digital, swift, and silent. It's up to us to pressure our governments, demand transparency in the development of lethal autonomous systems, and support international organizations working to ban killing machines without direct human supervision. It's time to turn fear into action, because the invisible war unfolding in the skies and online doesn't wait for empty decrees. The media plays a fundamental role in this transition between shadow and light. Investigative reporting, documentaries, and in-depth analysis can open the eyes of those still unaware of the extent of the problem. When cameras show the faces of victims of autonomous drone attacks, the debate ceases to be abstract and takes on human dimensions. Journalists who expose confidential contracts, experts who detail algorithm flaws, and influencers who educate their audiences about the risks strengthen the popular outcry for ethical and legal limits. If the news becomes a news story, Congress tends to act. If the story goes viral on social media, public pressure becomes a driver for change. Being vigilant and demanding responsible coverage is a powerful weapon to curb an escalation that, left unchecked, will only accelerate. Responsibility, however, doesn't fall solely on those who represent us or those who produce content. Every viewer who watches this video plays an active role, whether by signing international petitions, donating to human rights organizations, or supporting startups and researchers developing military technologies with built-in ethical clauses. We're sending a message: we will not accept a future where machines decide the lives of innocent people. Sharing reliable information, questioning official narratives, and discussing the issue with friends and family helps create a culture of social vigilance that hinders abuses of power. After all, collective pressure can be as powerful as the most advanced defense system. The technology industry also faces a moral crossroads. Companies that currently write lines of code for peaceful purposes can easily divert their expertise to military applications, pressuring these organizations to adopt responsible use policies with independent audits. Strict licensing and non-infringement clauses strengthens the civilian sector and creates barriers to the proliferation of autonomous weapons. Conscientious investors, informed customers, and vigilant regulators can transform the market, demonstrating that war cannot be financed without oversight. The end product should be trust, knowing that innovation serves peace, not destruction. There is also a quiet hope in the hands of AI researchers and developers. University labs and independent centers can lead AI for peace projects, developing monitoring systems that prevent accidental attacks, identify suspicious activity, and even facilitate real-time diplomatic dialogue. Instant translation tools, escalation pattern analysis, and conflict resolution simulations show that the same technology that creates data gardens for combat can also sow the ground for peace. Supporting research grants, global security-focused hackathons, and public-private partnerships are concrete ways to cultivate this future. Ultimately, the fate of this invisible war rests in the hands of all of us. Public silence in the face of danger constitutes acquiescence. Mass mobilization can impose limits on the unbridled advance of digital lethality. Ask yourself, are you willing to be a mere spectator, or will you become a protagonist in building a world where technology serves life, not death? The next war may not need soldiers, but it will certainly need voices capable of halting the thunderous silence of machines.